All right, well, we're going to get kicked off. So again, thank you for joining us for our KeyBank Small Business Workshop series titled Advanced Selling Secrets. We're very fortunate this morning to be joined by our very own Jim Jackson, who is an advisor with the Connecticut Small Business Development Center. Jim has been in our office for many years. He actually runs our Side Street to Main Street program, and he's a wealth of knowledge. So we're very fortunate to have his skill set here today to help train us on these great secrets. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Jackson. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can use the chat function at the bottom or the question and answer function to ask those questions, and we'll get to them as swiftly as we can. Again, thank you for joining us. Over to you, Jim.
All right. Thank you very much, Johanna. Good morning, everybody. We're going to talk about, let me get the presentation up here. Here we go. So we're going to talk about something I call advanced selling secrets. And you'll notice that the word secrets is in quotations. And the reason for that is that for most people in sales, many people get a little bit confused about how to do things a reasonable way. But what we're going to talk about really isn't secret at all. It's really common sense. And so as the subtitle says, one of the things we're going to do this morning is look at some of how you find the real needs and wants for your buyer so that you can reduce the frequency of stalls and objections, and later on, of course, buyer remorse. So let's get rolling with there we go. All right, I want to ask a quick question first. Before I start this particular slide. And in the chat, if you would, I want a yes or no answer to the following question. If you were at a social event of some form or other, you know, like a picnic or a cocktail party or a networking event, where you really didn't know too many people, or you were getting to know some folks, and someone comes up to you and asks what you do, how many of you, yes or no, would be proud to say, hey, I'm in sales? Let's see what the chat says. And I am trying to see the chat here. Johanna, what are we getting in the chat? You see?
I don't see any response to the chat yet. So I guess your answer is nobody would say that they're in sales.
Okay. And typically the reason for that is that people don't want to admit they're in sales, because what's the typical reaction you get from another person who doesn't know you very well if you say that you're in sales? What do you think? Normally, it would be, in virtually every class, someone comes up with this answer. It's the used car salesperson. Sales is nasty. Sales is not something nice. You know, sales, because you're getting your arm twisted, is often the public reaction. And so I'm here to dispel part of that. So let's talk about some things that stand in the way of salesperson effectiveness. That's why we're talking about personal sales concepts up here at the header. First of all, if you think about your experiences in the marketplace when you've been a buyer, we've certainly all run into that car salesperson. We've run into the guy with the, you know, double reverse Ben Franklin doorknob close kind of, you know, close now, close now, close now, twist your arm, you know, press hard, 3 copies kind of thing. But we probably have also been exposed to a situation where we were going to buy something important. It doesn't matter whether it was a car or your first home or making an investment or buying a substantial piece of furniture or whatever it happens to be, but something that was important to you, where making the right deal, making the right choice was important to you. And we have probably at least once in our lives been exposed to a salesperson who who really tried to help us and figure out what we wanted rather than what they wanted to sell. And the idea is that professional salespeople and professional sales processes are honorable professions, because the very best salespeople look at their customers and their prospects as if they were their friends, and they're willing to act in their friends' best interest, not in their own best interest. Because in the long run, that creates more sales success, and it creates more referrals and more repeat sales. So we start thinking, first of all, and we have to plant this in our own head, because if we think that sales is a disgusting and nasty thing to do to people, how's that going to affect our own performance as salespeople? It's going to certainly negatively impact it. So let's start with the premise that professional salespeople are honorable in their profession. The second thing to think about is that if you look at sales forces in general, where you've got a team of people making sales, very frequently you find that there are top performers and not so good performers. And it almost follows the Pareto Principle, or the 80-20 rule. What that means is that it is not uncommon in a sales force of 5 or 10 people, something like that, where 80% of the sales revenue is being brought in by 20% of the sales force. So those people are the ones who are always getting the President's Awards. If they're selling Mary Kay, they're getting the pink Cadillacs, that kind of thing. Conversely, though, it means that about 80% of the sales force is only making 20% of the sales revenue for their company. That means that they're probably not getting much in the way of commissions. They're probably getting nothing in the way of bonuses, things of that nature. And they're certainly not winning that trip to Bermuda. So the one thing to think about is, what is the difference between the 20% that's making 80% of the sales and the rest of the folks? Because often those folks who aren't winning the bonuses and aren't getting the trips to Bermuda are looking at these superstars just in awe. And gee whiz, how did they do it? Oh, I wish I could do that. And more frequently, it is not a huge gap. Very frequently, it's just a little bit of refinement of technique, of mindset, and so forth that can make the difference between those two groups. Because it is an inner game. It's how you see yourself and how you work on what you're doing. Because you think about that just a little bit that I just mentioned. Think about that in the context of the just finished Olympics in Tokyo. If you look at many of the events, especially things like many of the swimming events, men's and women's swimming, if you look at all of the various events, what was the difference between the first place time, the guy or gal who got the gold medal, and someone who came in fourth and got nothing but a wet face from swimming hard? In some cases, it's a few hundredths or a few tenths of a second. So it is just a little bit. And so you have to be thinking like a champion to make up that little difference. So, if you could do something just a little bit better, how well could you improve your performance? If you could do something even 1% better this month and 1% better the next month, it doesn't take long before that adds up. It's like compounding interest at the bank. Again, your biggest competition very frequently is the 6 inches between your ears, not the salesperson down the street. So you want to keep in mind that you are not only a good salesperson, but someone who really does care about your customers and what they need and what they want and how to get to them. Now, one of the things that also compounds the difficulty with many salespeople are fears, because they're afraid of various things like, well, they're not going to like me, they're going to throw me out of the office, they're going to say no, the usual kind of stuff. But think about the word fear as an acronym, F-E-A-R, false events appearing real. It's often like the nervous anticipation that people get when they go to the dentist's office. You know, they're sitting there in the waiting room and they're sweating and they're nervous. Oh, jeepers, I don't want to go in there. They're going to hurt me. They're going to this, going to that. And very frequently, that exposure, that experience in the dentist chair is not all that it was cracked up to be with the anticipated fear. So if you think about that and think about what can happen positively, that can help quite a bit. Now, another aspect of sales is that friendship, the ability of the salesperson to look upon their customers and prospects as friends for whom they're going to serve the friend's best interest, has a lot to do with it. And if you can build that relationship, and we'll talk about that here in a few slides, you have a much, much higher chance of making the kind of sales that you need to make. And then finally, enthusiasm. Enthusiasm for your product, for your service, not something that's over the top, something that you need a shovel to move, can be very, very productive, because enthusiasm can be a little bit like the flu. It can be contagious, because if you believe in your product, you can more easily, I should say, pass that enthusiasm on to your prospective buyer. So let's now talk about some things that are very important with respect to sales. There are five cardinal rules of sales that you violate at your own risk. So the first is, people love to buy, but they hate to be sold. And you know, typically when we're doing this seminar in person, you know, you get all kinds of yeses and nods out of the audience when we put this one up, because you think about your own shopping experiences. You know, especially in some of the older days, you'd go into a store and all of a sudden you'd have 3 salespeople jump all over you trying to be the one to serve your needs. Can I help you? Can I help you? What can I show you? You know, and you didn't want that attention yet. So, and people like to be able to shop about. They love to be able to make some choices. They will ask for assistance when necessary, but they want to do it on their own time frame when they're ready, and they don't want to have their arms twisted. So keep that in mind as you think about how you work with your prospects and customers. Now here, the second rule, there is no such thing as the customer, only this customer. This drives from the perennial fight between the marketing department and the sales department. Because much of your advertising, your marketing, your outreach is based on profiles of a typical customer or customer segment, the target market, so to speak. And so the target market defines the customer. What is their persona? What is their demographic? What is their background? What's their income? That sort of thing. What are their other interests? Now, those help drive the publicity campaigns, the marketing, the advertising, the social media, and so forth that it takes to attract people to your product or service. The trap is that too many salespeople use the customer persona as the basis of their sales approach, even though it may have nothing to do or very little to do with any particular individual customer. So the idea here is that when you finally get exposed to this particular customer, they cross the threshold, come in the door, you get online or on the phone with them, you have to think of them as a unique individual who may or may not have the attributes of the customer profile. So you need to find out what it is about this customer that it attracts them to your product or service and makes them unique, and how you're going to handle that. Now, for folks who've spent a lot of time working on their products and their services, especially smaller businesses where you are also the owner of the business, the third cardinal rule is sometimes frustrating and disappointing in some respects. Because when you think about it, customers really don't want your products or services. They don't give a hairy rat's behind about that. What they want is the results, the benefits, the outcomes that your products or services provide to them. So, someone who buys a particular small car isn't buying the nameplate, but they're buying either economy or safety or any other number of things, or style, whatever it happens to be. So it's the outcome, it's the result that they're paying for. And you need to find out what they're looking for to determine whether or not your products and services are the appropriate ones. And in fact, this goes back to that first bullet point under personal sales category, the personal sales attributes, and that sales is an honorable profession when done correctly. Because in some cases, it means that your product or service may not provide what the customer is looking for. And so you should feel free to say, hey, that's, what I've got really isn't going to do it, but here's where you can get it. Because often turning away that customer, or at least saying, hey, what I've got is really not going to fulfill the need or want you've got, not only shows that you are truthful and honorable, but it will send people away often impressed enough to send others to you as a referral, even though you may not have sold them. Question 4 is an interesting, Cardinal Rule 4 is interesting because many salespeople are in the profession because they're outgoing people. It's probably more than half of salespeople fall into the extroverted, outgoing personality type. And so they love talking with people and so forth. But good selling isn't about talking and pushing your product. So like it says here, selling ain't telling. It's about asking questions. The best salespeople ask lots of questions to figure out what it is that this customer, out of Cardinal Rule 2, is looking for, and how they might be able to provide that service or that product. And then finally, and this is probably the most important of the 5, people buy from people they trust. Because if you can come across, again, as a friend willing to act in the customer's best interest, you're much more likely to be able to break down those barriers that often provide bad information to the salesperson. Because you often find people who are so wary of salespeople that they will not give them straight answers to the questions they ask until they have earned some confidence. And so there are many sales programs that teach buyers are liars. It's one of the quotes that comes out of one of these programs. And it's because the salespeople have not established the level of trust required to make the sale appropriate. So let's move on. We also have to qualify our prospects. Not everybody is going to be able to buy our products and services. So let's look at 5 mandatory attributes that each prospective customer's got to have. And the first, and we keep talking about this, is the relationship. You've got to build an initial relationship with them so that you can have the kind of conversation that it takes to figure out what they want and what they need. You do have to have a decision maker with authority to act. So it's someone who can decide, yes, I want to buy, or no, I don't want to buy, and has the authority to be able to sign the contract, enter the deal, and so forth. Pay the money, whatever it happens to be. You would think that this would be pretty normal, a need or want for your product or service. But there's a big difference. When we normally do a live one, I'll ask the audience, what's the difference between need and want? And we get a variety of answers. And the difference is that need is typically rational and want is emotional. And one of the best ways to illustrate that is if you were to get up in the morning and you're running a little late, you run out to get in the car and drive off to either work or your appointment. And you turn the key and the car goes, oh, crap, it won't start. I guess I need a battery. Think about having to get a battery for your car for a minute. How many people stay up late at night and are lusting about having to buy a battery for their car? And the answer is nobody. However, if you think about things, clothing, fashion, things like that, for some guys, it's the tools at the adult toy store at Home Depot. People lust after those things. The next new pair of shoes or handbag isn't sold because the heel just fell off the shoe or the strap just broke off the handbag. It's because that is going to look bitchin' with this outfit. So, it's emotion, it's want, not need. Because when a kid says, "I need it, mommy," they really saying, "I want it," because they don't have a specific need for it. The fourth, budget or financial resources. They got to be able to pay for it. You got to have the capacity, whether it's the credit score, whether it's the credit card headroom, whether it's the checking account balance or the cash in the pocket. They've got to be able to pay for the item. And then 5, appropriate timing, because you can have someone with all 4 of the prior attributes that qualify them, but if the timing's off, then you're still not going to be able to make the sale. And one of the best examples of that is from my own office in my private practice, where we have we have leased copiers for the office for about 20 years. We're typically on a 3-year lease. And then what would typically happen, because we were working with one guy for many years who was very good at finding copiers that had just come off their first lease when they were brand new and quite expensive. And you were able to lease the used machine for another 3 years at a much reduced price. And so he was smart enough to know that as we were getting to the end of our 3-year lease, he'd start looking around for what the next machine would look like. And because the technology expanded and got better and cheaper over time, he was always able to come in and say, "Hey, I can get you, the lease is about up. I can get you into a bigger machine with faster copiers, faster number of copies, and here's some more additional features. And I can get it to you for less than you're paying now per month, plus paying off whatever's left of your lease." And so, of course, we would work with him. Now, the key here is that he knew the timing. But ironically, when the new machine got delivered, it could almost set a stopwatch for about 2 weeks. And all of a sudden, people start knocking on the door and say, "Hey, I'm from XYZ Copiers. Can I talk to you for a minute? What have you got now? What are you using? Yada, yada." And I'd say, "Well, wait a minute, guys, you're a few weeks too late. We just renewed a 3-year lease. Come back in 3 years and we'll talk to you then." And of course, they would never come back. So appropriate timing can be just as important as anything else. Now, another thing gets back to, all right, why should someone buy from you or your company? What is your competitive advantage? So the first thing, and this gets back to asking the questions and determining what this customer wants out of Cardinal Rule 2, what do they value? And what do they do? What do you do better than your competition? What are the products and services? How do you solve problems or issues? You have to position that value. Now, there is a value equation to think about. We'll talk about an example here in a moment. Most people have always thought about the value equation like the scales of justice statue, where you have the blindfolded woman on the pedestal with the weight balance back and forth. You got 2 pans, one on which goes the product or service, and the other holds the price. And if the price pan is too heavy, the needle on the scale goes over to "I don't buy." If the product outweighs the price on this little scale balance, then the needle on the top goes over to I'll probably buy it. But it's a little bit more complex than that, because the value equation actually consists of multiple variables, and these will vary with the customer and with time. So the quantity of what they get, the quality of what they get, price they have to pay, the service that comes with it, the timing, any impact or sustainability issues that tie into it, all weigh upon the buyer's decision-making process. A quick way to look at that is to think about a busy working mom. The pandemic is winding down a little bit for her company. She's back in the office. The social events are coming up again. Things are busy. She's got a particularly busy night tonight. She's running late though. She's got to take, Tommy to soccer practice, and going to take Mary to dance class. And so she needs to get home quickly, and she also needs to put something on the table for dinner very fast. And so she's saying, well, what can I do fast? Because I got to get in and out quickly. And she'd say, okay, we're just going to have Franks and beans tonight, because I got the Franks in the refrigerator. I've got some rolls. Oh, cripety. I need to get a can of beans. I just used the last can of beans. So mom's got to scream out of the office and get a can of beans on the way home. Mom generally has two choices. She can come rolling into the 50-acre parking lot at the Stop and Shop or the other big supermarket, go running into the store, go down somewhere at the back of the store near the milk and eggs where they keep the beans too, grab a can of beans off the shelf, run up to the front of the store and stand in that oxymoron called the express lane. Or she can do a four-wheel drift into the parking lot at the local convenience store, run in, grab a can of beans, same can of beans off the shelf, pay for those, run out, screech out of the parking lot, go home and put on dinner. Now, when you think about it for a minute, what's the difference between the price of that identical can of beans between the supermarket and the convenience store? Typically, the convenience store will be quite a bit higher priced than the supermarket. In some cases, maybe almost double the price for that exact same can of beans. And so, what did mom do here? Mom ran a value equation and she traded price for time. She was in and out fast. The store was close to home. So she was willing to pay double the price of a can of beans to cut the time so she could get dinner on the table and get everybody out on time to the soccer match and the dance class. Now, if mom's going to stock up on beans, she's not going to the convenience store. She's going to get out of the supermarket, or she's going to wait till, ShopRite does their can sale and she's going to stock up. So the value equation is also situationally appropriate. So you have to look at what is it that a customer is looking for in terms of the quality, the quantity, the price, the service, the time, all these things. There may be other aspects as well. But the point is there's a multivariable equation that is always being solved in the prospect's head, in your customer's head. And part of your job is to understand how each individual customer is processing that equation with respect to the purchase they want to make with your products and services. So let's look at a model that helps you run this process. Because unless you're selling something that's very unimportant to the customer is going to be using some level of that value equation, and you need to get inside their head to figure it out. So as part of putting together the process, we've created something called the six-base model of selling. Now, it's a lot like a baseball game, except instead of having 4 bases, it's got 6. Now, at the bottom center is home plate, where you always start off. And that's where you get your up bat. That's where you ultimately meet your prospect or your customer. Your objective is to first get on first base, just like in a regular baseball game. Now, on first base, you've done something called gaining favorable attention. That's a fancy way of saying I've earned enough trust to be able to have a more straightforward conversation with my customer. And then once I've earned some level of initial trust, built initial relationship with them, I can now ask myself to get on second base, which is to discover the need and want. And that's what are they really shopping for? Why are they shopping for it? What do they really want? What you have to peel the onion and get down to the core of what they're trying to get as results, benefits, and outcomes from this purchase. So once you have used your interrogatories, we're going to give you some questions that you can ask to get from first to second base. And once you've really discovered, you believe, what they need and what they want, then that allows you to move towards third base, where you actually present the product or the service, the benefits and the solution, the outcomes from what you're going to sell. And if those are satisfactory, then you move on to fourth base. If for some reason they're not, you go back to second base because you didn't really discover the need or the want. And again, once you have refined that, you can refine your proposal, your presentation, your pricing, your terms on third base. And if they are then satisfactory, you get to go to fourth base. And it does say commence new relationship there, which is kind of an odd term, but it's really closing the sale, getting the contract signed, providing the product. But the reason we use that term, it came from one of the best salesmen I ever knew in my life, who said, I don't believe in closing a sale. I believe in opening a relationship. And so that's where that comes from. Now, another important thing happens on fourth base to many salespeople, because once they close a sale and the transaction is made, this is where an awful lot of salespeople get their commission. And the trap here is that many salespeople, once they have closed the sale, the paperwork signed, the product's delivered, their commission has been paid, it's Miller time. They run off with their friends to celebrate, and they leave the game early. That's the wrong way to do it, because you want to then move to fifth base, where you follow up and deliver extra value. The key on fifth base, because many people have probably bought like that new car or something else. In the moment that the contract was signed and the cash passed back and forth, and the financing was approved, and you drove off the lot, you never heard from that person again. Whereas someone who follows up, delivers a little extra value of some form or other, and often that little extra value can be a little perk or something that's often just built into the price anyway. But it still feels good to have someone who's making sure that you're happy with what you bought and follows up. And if you do that, then you get to go back to home plate, which is now the continuation, because now you have an established customer relationship from which you can make additional follow-up sales or get follow-up referrals. And one of the things that most people in sales do know is that it's 5 or 6 times harder to get a brand new customer to make that sale, that first sale, than it is to work with an existing customer to get a second or a third or a fourth sale. And so being able to use this closed loop model and being able to use it wisely can increase not only your sales success, but it will increase your repeats and referrals. So second base, though, is pretty critical, where you want to find the need or the want. And so, on first base, you've got to have earned that right, gained the trust to get straight answers to 5 of these key questions. And these become more difficult in progression. So the first thing you want to talk about is, what do they need? What do they want? What are they looking for? What kind of product? What kind of service? Number 2, why do they need or want it? Number 3, why don't they have it already? What are they willing to do to get it? And what are the rewards and consequences for acting or not taking action? Because here you can ask questions and say, all right, if we buy this, tell me about how you're going to feel when you've got this new car and it has this safety feature and so forth. What happens if you get a vehicle that doesn't have this particular item that you've talked about, so on and so forth. By asking questions like that, you can emotionalize the sale in your favor, while still satisfying your customer, your prospect's needs to the fullest possible extent. Now, most salespeople run into things called stalls and objections. So let's talk about these a little bit. So a stall occurs when the prospect or the customer is unsure about something. So they could be worried about making a mistake. They may not be convinced they're making the right decision. They typically means that when you ask them questions, you're getting kind of vague responses to the question. So it generally means they're mulling it over, they're not sure, and they haven't been brought in, haven't been convinced. Something's missing. Objections occur when a prospect has a more specific issue. So they may be looking just for the best deal or just have a price objection. There still could be some trust issues. They're not ready to do the deal with you or your company. There might be some performance issues with respect to the product or the service. And it generally means that when you're asking questions, you're getting more specific responses back or more specific questions about some particular aspect. So one of the things you want to do is make sure that you ask, again, the appropriate questions. So if you're sensing that you've got a stall, you can say, well, tell me, what are you unsure about? What confidence did you need to build to make a firm decision? Let's review the benefits we discussed and make sure that we've got everything that you're looking for. Objection responses can be, okay, that's interesting, but tell me why you feel that way. Could you elaborate a bit more on that for me? Is there anything else that you're concerned about? Because you can then, again, rather than trying to talk your way into the sale, you want to ask more questions to figure out whether or not you have, on second base, for example, developed a true picture of the need or want, or have you got still a surface answer where the real need, the real want, or the real concern is still buried down towards the center of that onion that you got to peel a little further. Now, we also, as salespeople, have to keep score to keep track of our progress. So if we know if we're making improvements or not making improvements. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that on an oversimplified basis, there are two types of sale. There's a low-risk sale and a high-risk sale. And they're primarily separated by whether or not the sale itself, the transaction, the product, the service, in the mind of the customer is critical to them. From a price standpoint, a quality standpoint, from a likelihood of buyer's remorse for making the wrong choice. So buying a pack of gum at the store is typically a low-risk sale. Because if somebody tries a new pack of gum for $1, and they don't like it, fine, they'll toss it out and they'll go back to the one they like. The high-risk sale, though, and it doesn't matter whether it's something large like a house or a car or an investment, but anything where the customer is worried about making the right choice or paying too much, whatever it happens to be, in the mind of the customer, it's a high-risk sale. So with low-risk sales, there are basically two forms of keeping score. Success means you closed the sale, you made the deal. Failure means you didn't sell it, they went someplace else or bought something else. Relatively straightforward. In high-risk sales, obviously success means closing the sale as well. But it can also mean, because high-risk sales often do not take place in a single contact. Sometimes they are multi-meeting or multi-contact sales because somebody's shopping around. And somebody may go to 3 electronic stores to buy a new computer and look at the different models. They'll certainly go to different dealerships to drive and look at different cars and take different test drives. So another success in the high-risk sales process means making advances to the close, whereas failure means either lost momentum or losing the sale entirely. And so the question that we'll go through with the audience in a live session is what's the difference between advancing to close and losing momentum in the high-risk sale process? And the answer is fairly straightforward. When you advance to close, your customer or your prospect has made a commitment to move the process forward in one form or another. It could be scheduling another appointment, coming back in to take the test drive, whatever it happens to be. Lost momentum is when they will not make any commitment to move forward. And it's up to you to try and lasso them as they're leaving, going out the door, and trying to see if you can find out why they're not ready to move forward. So an example for that could be, and it would come out of my own private practice, if I had a preliminary meeting with a prospective client, and after the meeting, they say, Jim, that was a great meeting. Thank you very much. Next time you're in town, give me a call. Let's talk some more. So I would typically then bring out my calendar and say, well, I'm going to be back in town next Thursday. Have you got some time then? And then here's where the answer determines whether I'm making an advance or I'm losing momentum. And if the client says, oh yeah, okay, let's take a look at the calendar. Well, Thursday's not good. What's your next time? And so we make an appointment. At that point, we have advanced to close because the client, the prospect, has made a commitment to continue the process. If the response is, well, I'm going to be busy that day, just give me a call when you know you're going to be there at some other time. Again, it's the polite brush off, and it means that there may not be any interest, because when I call, what's the likelihood that they're going to take the call and make that appointment? It's usually pretty low. It does happen. Sometimes they're just busy enough that they don't want to commit to something at the moment. But for the most part, it's much more likely that they're not interested in continuing the process. Now, we all know that from Cardinal Rule 1, that closing is an issue with many salespeople, where they try too hard, too fast, they're twisting their arms, and people are reacting badly, which is why so many people do not want to admit to a stranger that they're in sales. So let's talk about the closing. In low-risk sales, closing techniques often work, and these have been taught by sales trainers since the beginning of the last century. Now, and there was some research done on this literally about 100 years ago that proved to them that closing techniques work pretty well. But the problem was, when you tore apart the studies that were done, they were done in low-risk sales. So here's a particular example. Let's say that I've got a pocket calculator that I've got in my jacket or in my purse or something like that. And these things are inexpensive now. And all of a sudden, my calculator breaks. I drop it and it breaks, or it just fails. And so I'm in the market for a new calculator. So I go down to Walmart or Radio Shack or someplace like that and look at the calculators. And these things can be $4, $5, $6, some of them, pretty cheap, pretty low risk sale. And so if I'm looking at the selection, and sometimes they're behind a counter or behind the glass, so that you can't put them in your pocket. So a salesperson comes up and says, okay, what are you looking? I'm looking for a new calculator. Just broke my old one, and so I'm looking at this $4 one that's a little 4-function calculator, pretty cheap, but it's all I need. And the salesperson asks how I'm going to use it and so forth. And he says, well, this one right next to it here, this $5 model, has a solar cell on it that the other one doesn't. And the solar cell means that it's going to run on ambient light, even inside an office rather than outdoors. And so it's very, very rare that one of these ever drains its battery, so that you'll never run out of power on the thing. Okay, fine. So you buy the $5 one. And nobody's going to go home and have buyer's remorse over having paid $5 for the calculator instead of $4. But you just got upsold by 25% with a closing technique. But again, because it was a low risk sale, it wasn't a big deal, and if you just said, no, I just want the $4 one, then that's all it was going to be. The guy wasn't going to, or gal wasn't going to twist your arm. Now, in high risk sales, where something is very important to us, getting the right deal, getting the right price, making the right choice, closing techniques almost always fail because they violate Cardinal Rule 1. People love to buy but hate to be sold. There have been a number of studies done on this much more recently than towards the end of the last century, but they've been scientifically controlled, and they have been on high-risk sales. One of the best examples of that, you may recall, back before the internet, before you could go to Travelocity or places like that to book an airline ticket, you had to call either a travel agent or you had to call an 800 number at the airline to be able to get a price and book a ticket. Now, back in those days, some of you may remember that American Airlines had a huge call center in downtown Hartford, Connecticut, where an awful lot of the calls coming in to book airline tickets came. Now, at that time, the salespeople and the marketing people at American were, having an argument over scripting the call center's representatives, because the sales staff wanted to push hard on closing to sell tickets, and the marketing side was saying, well, wait a minute, no, that's not going to work. You do that too aggressively, people are going to respond negatively. So they set up a controlled test. So they took a number of their most skilled reservationists, and they did this over a course of several weeks. And so for the first week, they gave all of these reservationists a script that had no closing request in it at all. So, for example, if the phone call rang, ring, American Airlines, how can I help you? Yeah, I'm looking for a ticket from Hartford to Chicago. What do you got? And so the reservationist would then say, well, we've got a 7:30 that leaves nonstop. We have a 10 o'clock, we have a 2:30, and so on and so forth. And they would give the caller all the information they were looking for, the times and the prices and the seating and all that, anything they were asking for. And the call would basically end with, is there anything else, sir or ma'am, that I can help you with? But they wouldn't ask to close the sale. They wouldn't ask to book a ticket. So that was their control baseline. Now, in the open class, I typically would ask the audience to give me an opinion on what percentage of those callers actually bought a ticket. And the answer was about 26% would actually say, okay, give me the 10 o'clock and I'll take a ticket, I'll take a seat in coach. So that established a baseline. So the next week, they put in what we call a one close script. So it worked exactly the same way as the first week. Ring, American Airlines, how can I help you? Yeah, I'm looking for a ticket from Hartford to Chicago. What do you got? And they go through all of the information, get all the information to the customer that they wanted. And at the end of the call, they would say, may I book one of those for you, sir or ma'am? And that's all they did. They asked once, and it was after the customer had gotten all the information they were trying to get. So what happened to the closing rate? As you might guess, it went up. In fact, it went up substantially. It went up to about 2/3, about 66%. So, 2 out of every 3 calls now would result in a booked ticket for a flight. Okay, so another data point. So now the salespeople, they always be closing sales types saying, all right, fine, we knew that was going to happen. So now let's ramp it up. So they did a 2-close call script. So here's in week 3, ring, American Airlines, how can I help you? Yeah, I'd look to buy a ticket from Hartford to Chicago. Yeah, and we have a nice 7:30 nonstop. Can I book that one for you, sir or ma'am? No. I want what else you got? Well, we got a 10 o'clock, we got a 2 o'clock, we got a 4:30. And then they go through all the stuff all the information that the prospect wanted, and then they'd close again at the final end saying, may I book one of those for you, sir or ma'am? So the ABC people, the always be closing people, expected that the sales rate would go up even further. And in fact, it did not. It dropped to a little bit under 50%. And so the hardcore high pressure sales people were saying, no, that's got to be an aberration. let's dial it up a notch. Let's put in a 3 close call script. And so that worked this way. Ring, 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 American Airlines, how can I help you? Yeah, I'm looking for a ticket from Hartford, Chicago. What do you got? Yeah, well, we've got a 7:30. It's nice nonstop. Can I book that for you, sir? No. What else you got? We got a 10 o'clock. Can I book that one for you, sir? No. What else you got? I got a 2 o'clock, got a 4:30. And so on. And so what happened, do you think, to the closing rate then? It went down further. In fact, it went down to about 22%, which was lower than if they didn't ask ever at all. And so the key is that, especially for high-risk sales, closing prematurely will deter your customer, break the relationship. It will reduce the amount that you're going to close and build sales volume and repeat and referral business. So you do have to close, but you've got to have built the trust and really found the need and want, and being able to offer the appropriate product or service is key here. So we've reached the end of the formal part of the program. And so I always say it makes sense for a little action plan. So everything we've talked about today is almost worthless unless you do something, unless you act on something that we've talked about today. So one of the things that I'd ask you to do is, get out a pencil and paper if you don't have one already, taking notes, and write down the 3 most important things you learned today that you'll use right away. And then what we will do, I will forward a handout of all these slides to the chamber shortly after we finish the program, and so that you will have all that we've seen on the screen. So at this point, I'm going to end the presentation, and then I'm going to have Johanna open it up for any other questions you've got, and unmute the microphones.
All right. Thank you very much, Jim. We very much appreciate that. So if anyone would like to ask a question, please just raise your hand and we can allow you to talk. We'd love to get some feedback from you. And if you have any questions at all, now is the time to ask while the expert is here. All right. Thank you, Mary Kay. Thank you, Jim. This was wonderful. I so appreciate you sharing your experience. She has to hop off. Thank you for joining us, Mary Kay. We appreciate it. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, because this is the audience participation portion of the program now.
You've got the expert here. And as Jim stated, we will be sharing these slides with you after the presentation is over. So watch your email for that as well. Jim's information is there. So if you have any future questions, he'd be more than willing to set up a time to chat with you, I'm sure. But we have a few more minutes for questions.
Must have put them all to sleep, huh?
Not at all. You gave great information. See? Fantastic done. Well done, Jim. All right. Well, without no questions, thank you very much again for joining us. And like I said, we will be sending these slides to you. So watch your email shortly. Jim, as always, we miss you here in Middletown, but it's great to see you around the squares. And thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to join us today.
You are certainly welcome. Thank you very much for having me. Take care, everybody.
All right. Be safe. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.